All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about here is um, lawmaking in the Senate. How does that really work? What is the day-to-day life of a senator like? Um, and we mentioned earlier that in the Senate and the House alike, all bills, all laws start in committee. So the majority of the time for a senator's actual work, he or she is spending their time in committees, they're seeing experts, they're debating out and discussing and questioning and trying to get information on laws that they're writing. They're becoming experts on the field of their committees. But the Senate is different than the House, and it has a lot of kind of old, weird rules that make it harder for bills to be passed in the Senate than the House. Now, remember, in the House, a simple majority gets a bill passed. So, oftentimes, you'll find that in the House, there'll be a lot of bills passed, and that the Senate will then slow down and only get a small percentage of those bills passed. Um, some would say that's a good thing. That was kind of the original intent, that the House was supposed to be every 2 years, fresh bloods, passing on the ideas of the people, and that the Senate would be more deliberative, that they would think these things through, and that they would only pass a little bit and not worry as much about the will of the people, but instead what's right and wrong. There are there's one of the rules here that's kind of weird, is this unanimous consent. It allows one member of the Senate to slow down and sometimes even stop a bill from even being voted on. So now we're saying that in the Senate, one person can slow down a bill. 1 out of 99 could slow down a bill and maybe even sometimes stop it from being voted on in that particular session of the Senate. Sometimes the senator gets some changes to the debate, like no amendments can be allowed. So an amendment to a bill is when they're debating it, they'll say, I want to add something to this bill. I want to add something to this bill. And if they don't get the proper amendment process, or has to do with how much time we get to debate on it, a senator can sometimes slow down or even stop a bill from being voted on. That being said, sometimes the Senate can ignore precedents and ignore norms and just choose to vote on it anyways. It's really a weird system. A lot of our government, we're finding out, or we've found out, is based on traditions and honor, and this is how things have been done. You don't always have to do that. You can just break tradition. You can do what was once considered to be dishonorable, and you can push things that you want and put the brakes on things you don't. Some would suggest that over the last, 20 years, we've seen some flaws in our government that need to be fixed when it comes to when do we follow the rules and when do we not, and what's a rule and what's a norm, and there should be some definition there. We also know that there's a filibuster. Filibuster is a way for a group of senators to kill a bill. And if you have 41 senators together, they can check the filibuster box and they can keep a bill from being voted on. In 1970, the Senate allowed the two-track rule, meaning they can have a filibuster going on while other stuff is going on. So you check the filibuster box and let's move on to something else. Well, before 1970, the filibuster was a talking filibuster and they had to just keep going until they couldn't stop. So there has been some changes to the rule, which makes filibusters easier to do. That was not the original intent. If you look at this chart, you'll see that historically in our country, going back 100 years, there were almost no filibusters. until 1970. So they would only try and kill a bill when it was of extreme importance. And now it seems as though oftentimes, people just filibuster everything. They try and gum up the works. And oftentimes that's the goal, is to have nothing get done. Maybe to make the government look bad. You can see that the number of filibusters in blue here, filibusters, motions filed, has gone up dramatically since the 1970s, all the way up here during Obama's first 2 years. This number had more than tripled, quadrupled. I mean, it went from being down here in less than 10 a year, all the way up to 140, 50 a year. We're talking about exponential change in filibuster rules. And how do you stop a filibuster? Well, if you get 60 people together, you can do what's called a cloture vote. And in a cloture vote, you can say, we're going to stop the filibuster because we have 60 votes. And you can see that that has been happening more as more filibusters have been filed. So the number of votes for cloture have increased, and the number of times that it's actually shut down a filibuster have been increased. So again, the filibuster was eliminated when it comes to judicial nominees in 2012, and then eliminated under Obama. And then under Trump, it was eliminated when it comes to Supreme Court nominees as well. So we're seeing a chipping away at the filibuster. Some would suggest it's because the filibuster has been abused ever since 1970, when they took away the original talking filibuster and they replaced it with the check the box filibuster.